The train rocked through the mountain pass at midnight, and Clara Ashford realized she was falling in love with a man whose last name she didn't know. She had boarded the sleeper train in Vienna with her cello strapped in its case beside her, exhausted from 3 concerts in 4 days, ready to sleep through the journey to Prague. Instead, she'd spent 6 hours talking to the stranger across the narrow aisle, the one with bone-white hair swept back from a face too beautiful to be anything but dangerous, who wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire tour contract, and who spoke about music like he'd heard every composer play their work live. His name was Bastian, he'd said. Just Bastian. And he'd asked her about the cello with genuine curiosity, not the polite small talk most passengers offered. They'd talked about Bach and Dvořák, about the way certain pieces made you feel like you were remembering something you'd never lived, about the loneliness of constant travel and the strange intimacy of train compartments where strangers became confessors for a night. The train swayed around a curve and Clara gripped the armrest. Through the window, moonlight spilled over snow-covered peaks, turning the world silver and black. She looked at Bastian again, really looked, and saw the way shadows loved his face, how his eyes reflected light like a cat's, how his skin was so pale it seemed to glow. She'd spent her whole life being careful. 24 years of practice rooms and auditions and keeping her head down, of being professional and pleasant and never too much of anything. But something about this night, this train, this impossible stranger, made her want to be reckless. "I think I'm falling for you," she whispered across the aisle. The words left her mouth before she could stop them, raw and honest and terrifying. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The rational part of her brain was screaming that she'd just met him, that this was insane, that she'd ruined everything. Bastian went very still, his eyes dark in the dim compartment, but catching the moonlight with an amber gleam locked onto hers. For one horrible moment, she thought he would laugh or look away or pretend he hadn't heard. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and his voice when he spoke was warm and sure and completely unafraid. "Then I'll fall with you." Clara's breath caught. She searched his face for mockery or doubt and found neither. He looked at her like she'd just said the most natural thing in the world, like he'd been waiting all night to hear it. "You don't think that's crazy?" she asked, barely louder than the train's rhythm. "I think," Bastian said slowly, "that I've lived a very long time, and I've learned to recognize when something matters." He stood, crossed the narrow space between them, and sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the coolness radiating from him. Not cold exactly, but like marble in shadow. "I think you're extraordinary, Clara Ashford. I think 6 hours with you has been worth more than years I've spent pretending to care about things that don't matter." She turned to face him fully. Up close, his beauty was almost painful, the sharp lines of his jaw, the fullness of his mouth, the way his white hair fell just past his collar. Everything about him screamed old money and danger and secrets. "Who are you?" she asked. "Really?" Bastian smiled, and she saw the flash of teeth too white, too sharp. "That's a complicated question." "I have time. Prague is still hours away." He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing something heavy. Then he reached out and took her hand, his fingers cool against her palm. "If I tell you, you might run. If you don't tell me, I definitely will." That pulled a soft laugh from him. "Fair enough." He laced his fingers through hers, and the gesture felt both intimate and grounding. "My full name is Bastian Corvinus. I'm not human, Clara. I'm a vampire. And not just any vampire, I'm the king of the Corvinus bloodline, one of the 4 great houses that rule my kind." The train clattered over a bridge, the sound hollow and echoing. Clara's first instinct was to laugh, to assume this was some elaborate joke. But she looked at his face, serious, patient, waiting, and felt the unnatural chill of his hand in hers, and remembered the way he'd talked about Mozart like he'd attended the premiere. "How old are you?" she heard herself ask. 317. Her mind reeled. She should be terrified. She should pull her hand away and run to another compartment and forget this night ever happened. Instead, she found herself asking, "Does it hurt? When you drink blood?" "Not if it's done right. Not if there's trust." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I haven't hurt anyone in a very long time. My kind, the old bloodlines. At least we have laws. codes. We're not monsters, despite what the stories say. But you could be, Clara said quietly. If you wanted. Yes? He didn't look away. But I don't want, and I never have, not in 3 centuries. She believed him. God help her, she believed him completely. Maybe it was insanity, or maybe it was whatever strange magic had started the moment their eyes met in this train compartment, but she wasn't afraid. Show me, she said. Bastian's eyes widened. Clara, your true face, whatever you're hiding. She squeezed his hand. I told you I'm falling for you. I want to see all of you. For a moment, he looked almost vulnerable. Then he closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they blazed amber gold, bright as candle flames. His fangs lengthened, pressing against his lower lip, and the shadows in the compartment seemed to gather around him like a cloak. He was beautiful and terrible and utterly inhuman. Clara reached up and touched his face, fingers trembling only slightly. His skin was smooth and cold as river stones. There you are, she whispered. Bastian made a sound low in his throat, part surprise, part something that might have been relief. He turned his face into her palm, and she felt the careful press of fangs against her wrist, never breaking skin. You're not afraid, he said, wonder in his voice. I'm terrified, Clara admitted, but not of you hurting me. I'm afraid that when this train stops, I'll lose you. He pulled back, his features sliding back to human, or human enough, and cupped her face in both hands. Then we don't get off the train. She laughed despite everything. We have to eventually. Do we? His smile was crooked, almost boyish. I'm a king, Clara. I could buy this entire train. We could just keep riding in circles forever. That's insane. You started it, falling for strangers on night trains. But his smile faded, and something troubled crossed his face. Though there's something I need to tell you. Something that makes this complicated. Clara's stomach tightened. Tell me. Bastian stood, suddenly restless, and moved to the window. The moonlight painted him in shades of silver. Being king isn't just a title. It comes with responsibilities. My bloodline has been at peace with the other 3 great houses for 70 years, but that peace is fragile. The Draconis house in the east has been pushing for expansion, testing borders. The Noctis house in the south is ancient and proud and resents that my bloodline holds the largest territory. The Erebus house in the north is small but fierce and always looking for advantages. He pressed his palm against the glass. For the past year, the other kings and I have been negotiating a formal alliance, a unification treaty that would bind all 4 houses together, make it impossible for anyone to move against another without consequences. It would ensure peace for the next century at least. Clara stood and moved beside him. That sounds like a good thing. It is. Except the Draconis king, Lucian Draconis, has made his support contingent on one condition. Bastian's jaw tightened. A marriage alliance between his sister Serafina and me. The words hit Clara like cold water. Oh. I've been stalling for months, Bastian continued, his voice tight. I've proposed every alternative I can think of. But Lucian won't budge, and without the Draconis house, the treaty collapses. And without the treaty, we're looking at fractures that could turn into civil war. My advisors tell me it's already starting border skirmishes, territory disputes, old grudges resurfacing. If I don't agree to the marriage soon, people will die. Clara's chest ached. She'd known him for 6 hours, and already the thought of him marrying someone else made her want to scream. Have you met her? Serafina? Twice. She's intelligent, politically savvy, and has no interest in marrying me either. A bitter laugh escaped him. She's in love with someone from her own house, a general named Victor. But she'll do her duty if her brother commands it, just as I'm expected to do mine. So you're trapped. We're all trapped. He finally looked at her, and the anguish in his eyes was raw. And then I got on this train tonight, planning to spend the journey reviewing treaty documents and preparing myself for a loveless eternity. Instead, I met you. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. And I just made everything worse. No. Bastian turned and pulled her against him, arms wrapping around her with surprising gentleness. She rested her head against his chest and heard nothing, no heartbeat, just stillness. You made everything clear. I've spent months telling myself that marriage without love is just politics, that I could live with it because it serves my people. But now I know what falling feels like, and I can't pretend anymore. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. His hand stroked through her hair. But I won't lie to you, Clara. I won't pretend this isn't happening, and I won't ask you to run away with me, because running away means abandoning my people to war. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. I need time to find another solution, a real one. How much time do you have? The Unification Summit is in 6 weeks, in Prague. His smile was grim. I was heading there tonight to meet with my council. If I can't find an alternative by then, the wedding will be announced at the closing ceremony. 6 weeks. Clara's tour ended in 4. She had concerts scheduled across Central Europe, Prague, Munich, Budapest. Then she was supposed to fly home to Boston and resume teaching at the conservatory. The train began to slow, the rhythm changing. Through the window, Clara could see lights in the distance, the outskirts of Prague. "Come with me," Bastian said suddenly. "Not to run away, to help me find a way through this. I'm a cellist. What can I possibly do against vampire politics? You reminded me what matters." His hands framed her face. "And you're clever and brave, and you said you're falling for me." Was that true? "Yes," Clara whispered, "terrifyingly true." "Then fall with me," he said, echoing his earlier promise. "Stay in Prague. Let me court you properly while I untangle this mess. If I fail, if I can't find another way, then at least we'll have these 6 weeks. And if I succeed—" He leaned down until his forehead touched hers. "If I succeed, then maybe we get forever." The train pulled into the station with a hiss of brakes and steam. Clara thought of her careful life, her planned future, all the reasons this was madness. Then she thought of 6 hours of conversation that felt like coming home, and a man who looked at her like she was the music he'd been waiting centuries to hear. "Okay," she said, "I'm in." Bastian kissed her then, soft and careful and achingly sweet. His mouth was cool against hers, and she tasted mint and something wilder, something that made her heart race. When he pulled back, his eyes were glowing amber again. "Thank you," he breathed, "for believing in this, in us." Clara grabbed her cello case as the train doors opened. "So what's the plan?" "First, I get you settled in a hotel. Then I meet with my council and tell them I'm looking for alternatives to the marriage." He took her free hand as they stepped onto the platform. "And then we figure out how to prevent a war and keep me from marrying someone else. Simple." "Simple," Clara repeated, laughing despite everything. "Sure." Prague station at 2 in the morning was nearly empty, their footsteps echoing on the marble floors. A black car was waiting outside, and Clara realized that of course it was King's didn't wait for taxis. Bastian held the door for her, and she slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her childhood home. "Where are you staying?" he asked as the car pulled away from the station. "I have a hostel booked near Wenceslas Square." Bastian made a face. "Absolutely not. I'm putting you in the Alchemist." "Bastian, I can't afford—" I can," he squeezed her hand. "Please, let me do this. You're helping me. It's the least I can offer." Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her, and the thought of a proper bed was too tempting. "Fine, but I'm paying you back somehow." "You already are, just by being here." The Alchemist Grand Hotel was the kind of place Clara had only seen in magazines, Baroque architecture, gilded details, and a doorman who bowed to Bastian like he was, well, a king. The night manager appeared instantly, and Bastian murmured something too low for Clara to catch. Within minutes, she had a key to a suite on the top floor. "I need to go," Bastian said as they stood in the lobby. "My counsel's expecting me, but I'll come find you tomorrow evening. Sleep as late as you want, order whatever you need, and don't worry about anything." Clara nodded, suddenly shy. "Will you be okay?" "I've survived 3 centuries of vampire politics. I think I can handle one more council meeting." But his smile was strained. "Though I admit this is the first time I've walked in planning to defy them." "You're not defying them. You're finding a better solution. You're optimistic. I like that." He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, old-fashioned and courtly. "Sleep well, Clara Ashford. You too. If you sleep?" "Not often, but I'll rest easier knowing you're safe." He left, and Clara rode the elevator up to her suite in a daze. The room was stunning high ceilings, velvet furniture, windows overlooking the Vltava River. She set her cello carefully in the corner, then collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. What had she done? She'd agreed to help a vampire king fight a political marriage so he could be with her instead. It was insane. It was a fairy tale. It was the kind of thing that happened in books, not to ordinary cellists from Boston who'd never done a reckless thing in their lives. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Bastian's face, the warmth in his smile, the honesty in his eyes, the way he'd said, "Then I'll fall with you," like it was a vow. Clara fell asleep still wearing her shoes, and she dreamed of music and moonlight and a man with white hair who looked at her like she was worth fighting for. She woke to afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows and room service knocking on the door. A cart rolled in bearing breakfast or brunch, given the time with coffee and pastries, and a note in elegant script: "Eat, rest, I'll come at sunset." Clara ate slowly, trying to wrap her mind around everything. In daylight, the previous night felt like a fever dream. Had she really confessed feelings to a stranger? Had he really told her he was a vampire king? But the hotel suite was real, and the note was real, and when she checked her phone, she had a text from an unknown number. "It's Bastian. I hope you slept well. Last night wasn't a dream, and I meant every word." Her heart did something complicated in her chest. She texted back, "Me too. See you at sunset." The hours crawled by. Clara practiced her cello, running through the pieces for her concert in 3 days. She showered and changed and tried not to check the clock every 5 minutes. As the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and gold, she found herself pacing in front of the windows. A knock came exactly as the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon. Clara opened the door, and there he was, Bastian, in a dark sweater and jeans, somehow looking both casual and regal. His white hair was slightly disheveled, and there were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Hi," she said, suddenly breathless. "Hi yourself." He stepped inside, and she noticed he waited for her invitation, crossing the threshold only after she'd moved back. "How are you?" "Nervous, excited, completely out of my depth." She laughed shakily. "How did the meeting go?" Bastian's expression darkened. "About as well as expected. My counsel thinks I've lost my mind." He moved to the windows, looking out over the city. "I told them I was pursuing alternative solutions to the marriage alliance. They told me there are no alternatives, that Lucian Draconis won't accept anything else, and that I'm risking everything for a human I just met." "They're not wrong," Clara said quietly. "About the risks, I mean. They're wrong about you." He turned to face her. "I've thought about nothing else all day, Clara. I've reviewed every treaty negotiation from the past century, consulted with historians, reached out to allies in the other houses. There has to be a way to secure peace without a marriage alliance." "Have you found one?" "Not yet." The admission clearly pained him. "But I have ideas. The marriage was meant to serve 2 purposes: symbolize unity between the houses and give Lucian Draconis a direct line to the Corvinus throne through his sister. But what if I could offer something that serves the same purposes without the marriage?" Clara moved to stand beside him. "Like what?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "A military alliance with joint forces, a council with representatives from each house sharing real power, trade agreements that make us economically interdependent?" He shook his head. "Any one of those would be easier to negotiate than the marriage was. But I need something strong enough that Lucian feels he's getting equal value." "What does he actually want?" Clara asked. "Besides his sister being queen?" Bastian blinked, then focused on her with sudden intensity. "What do you mean?" "I mean, a marriage is just a tool, right? What's the real goal underneath?" She tried to organize her thoughts. "You said Serafina is in love with someone else, so Lucian isn't doing this for her happiness. What does he gain?" "Influence, security, a guarantee that if the houses ever conflict, his bloodline has protection through Serafina's position." "So he's afraid," Clara said slowly. "He doesn't trust the peace to last, so he wants insurance." Bastian stared at her. "I've been so focused on what he's demanding that I haven't thought about why he's demanding it." He grabbed her shoulders, excitement building in his voice. "Clara, you're brilliant. If Lucian's real concern is security for his house, then I need to address that directly. Create ironclad protections that make a marriage alliance redundant. How? I don't know yet, but I will. He pulled her into a fierce hug. Thank you. This is the first real progress I've made in months. Clara wrapped her arms around him, feeling the solid coolness of his body against hers. I didn't do anything. You asked the right question. Sometimes that's everything. He pulled back enough to look at her. Now, I believe I promised to court you properly. Are you hungry? Always. Good. I made reservations at a restaurant in the old town. They serve the best svíčková in Prague, according to my sources. You have sources for Czech cuisine? I have sources for everything. It's part of the king job. His smile was teasing. Come on, let's pretend to be normal for a few hours. They walked through Prague's winding streets, and it felt like something from a dream. The city was beautiful in the evening. Gothic spires reaching toward the stars, cobblestone streets lit by old-fashioned lamps, the river reflecting lights like scattered jewels. Bastian kept his hand at the small of her back, a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. The restaurant was small and warm, tucked down an alley. The owner greeted Bastian by name, then showed them to a private table in the back. Clara ordered svíčková, and Bastian requested wine for her and nothing for himself. You don't eat? She asked when they were alone. I can, though I don't enjoy it. Food tastes like ash when you've lived on blood for 3 centuries. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. Tell me about your life, Clara. The parts I don't know yet. So she told him. About growing up in a small town in Vermont, the daughter of a music teacher who'd encouraged her passion for cello. About winning a scholarship to Juilliard and spending 4 years in New York, feeling constantly behind the prodigies who'd been training since they could walk. About graduating and scrambling for gigs, teaching lessons to pay rent, slowly building a career through orchestral work and chamber groups. This tour is the biggest thing that's happened to me, she admitted. 6 weeks, 10 cities, actually performing as a soloist instead of just part of an ensemble. My manager says if it goes well, it could lead to a recording contract. It will go well, Bastian said with absolute certainty. I heard you play in that train compartment. The way you described music, you have a gift. I was just talking. You were making me fall in love with you, he said simply, which I think is a gift all its own. Clara's breath caught. Love? It's been less than 24 hours. I told you I've lived a very long time. I know the difference between infatuation and something real. He reached across the table and took her hand. I know this is fast, Clara. I know it's terrifying. But I also know that some things are worth the terror. Her food arrived, interrupting the moment. Clara ate while Bastian told her about Prague, the history hidden in every street, the vampire society that existed beneath the human one, the courts and councils and ancient protocols that governed his kind. There are about 5,000 vampires in Prague at any given time, he explained. Most live in the underground district beneath the old town. We've had an agreement with the city's human government for over 200 years. They ignore what we are, and we protect the city from threats they don't want to acknowledge. What kind of threats? Other supernatural creatures, rogue vampires who break our laws, occasionally demons trying to cross over from their realm. He said it so casually, like he was discussing weather patterns. The human world thinks we're the only monsters in the dark. We're not. We're just the most organized. Clara tried to process that. So you're like supernatural police? More like supernatural royalty with a strong interest in maintaining order. Chaos is bad for everyone. He smiled at her expression. I promise, it's not as dramatic as it sounds. Most of my work is bureaucracy and diplomacy, not fighting demons in the streets. But sometimes fighting demons in the streets? Sometimes, he admitted, though I have people for that now. Being king means delegating. After dinner, they walked along the river, and Bastian told her stories from his 3 centuries. He'd been born in 1708, turned at 25 by a vampire who'd seen potential in him. He'd lived through wars and revolutions, seen empires rise and fall, watched the world transform from candlelight to electricity to smartphones. Don't you get tired? Clara asked, living that long. Sometimes, he said honestly. There are decades that blur together, times when everything feels repetitive and meaningless. But then something surprises you. Someone surprises you. He stopped walking and turned to face her. You're my surprise, Clara. My reminder that the world can still be new. She kissed him then, standing on a bridge over the Vltava with Prague spread out around them like a storybook city. He made a sound of surprise, then pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. His mouth was cool and tasted like night air, and when his fangs grazed her lower lip, she shivered with something that wasn't fear. "Careful," he murmured against her mouth. "I'm trying to be a gentleman." "What if I don't want a gentleman?" His eyes flashed amber. "Don't tempt me, Clara. I'm already breaking every rule by being with you at all." "Good," she said, and kissed him again. They walked back to her hotel slowly, reluctant to end the evening. In the lobby, Bastian stopped. "I should go. I have more meetings tomorrow. I'm trying to arrange a preliminary discussion with Lucian Draconis before the summit." "Will he agree to meet?" "He'll be curious about why I'm suddenly interested in renegotiating." "That might be enough." Bastian brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Your concert is in 3 days, yes?" "Friday night, at the Rudolfinum. I'll be there, front row." "You don't have to." "I want to," he said firmly. "I want to see you in your element, doing what you love. And then afterward, if you'll let me, I want to take you somewhere special." "Where?" "It's a surprise." His smile was mysterious. "Trust me?" "Against all reason, yes." He kissed her goodnight, soft and lingering, then vanished into the darkness so quickly Clara barely saw him move. She went up to her suite floating, feeling like she'd stepped into someone else's life, someone braver and more extraordinary than she'd ever imagined being. The next 3 days passed in a blur of rehearsals and stolen moments with Bastian. He came each evening after sunset, and they explored Prague together, visiting the castle, walking through the old Jewish quarter, sitting in quiet cafes while Clara ate dinner, and Bastian watched her with unguarded affection. He told her about the progress he was making, the delicate negotiations with Lucian Draconis. "He's agreed to meet me privately before the summit. That's something. He's also curious about my alternative proposals, which means he's not completely opposed to negotiating. That's good, right? It's a start. But Lucian is shrewd. He won't give up the marriage alliance unless I offer something he values more." Bastian looked tired, the shadows under his eyes darker than before. "I'm working on it." Clara hated seeing him stressed. She wanted to help, but vampire politics was so far outside her knowledge that she felt useless. Instead, she did what she could: listened when he needed to talk, distracted him with stories about her rehearsals, reminded him that he wasn't alone in this. On Friday evening, 2 hours before her concert, Bastian appeared at her hotel suite with a long velvet box. "I can't accept that," Clara said immediately, "whatever it is." "You can and you will." He opened the box, revealing a necklace of silver and moonstones. "It's not a gift, it's a promise. Something beautiful for someone beautiful, and a reminder that I'm thinking of you tonight." He fastened it around her neck, his cool fingers gentle against her skin. In the mirror, Clara barely recognized herself. The necklace made her look elegant and mysterious, someone who belonged in this world of vampires and magic. "You're going to be magnificent," Bastian whispered in her ear, "and I'll be watching every moment." The Rudolfinum concert hall was packed, and Clara felt her usual pre-performance nerves amplify, knowing Bastian was in the audience. But when she walked on stage and saw him in the front row, white hair gleaming under the lights, dressed in a dark suit that made him look like visiting royalty, her nerves steadied. He believed in her. That was enough. She played Dvořák's cello concerto, and it was the best performance of her life. The music poured through her, rich and emotional, and she let herself feel everything: the terror and joy of the past few days, the impossible situation with Bastian, the love growing in her chest like a living thing. The cello sang under her hands, and for those 40 minutes, there was only music and emotion and truth. When the final note faded, the audience erupted. Clara stood for her bow, and her eyes found Bastian immediately. He was standing too, his expression fierce and proud, and the look on his face made her heart stutter. Backstage, she barely had time to put away her cello before he was there, pulling her into his arms. "Clara," he breathed, "that was extraordinary. You were extraordinary." "You're biased," she said, laughing against his chest. "I'm honest." He pulled back enough to kiss her, deep and possessive. When they broke apart, his eyes were glowing amber. "Come with me. Now, I want to show you something." He led her through Prague's streets, moving faster than a human could walk, his hand tight around hers. They ended up at a door hidden in an alley, unmarked and unassuming. Bastian pressed his palm to the wood, and Clara heard locks clicking open. "Welcome," he said, "to my world." They descended a stone staircase that seemed to go on forever, spiraling down into the earth. The air grew cooler, and Clara began to see lights not electric, but something that glowed silver and soft. And then the stairs opened up, and she stopped breathing. They were standing at the edge of an underground city. Buildings rose from cavern floors, carved from stone and crystal, lit by phosphorescent minerals that made everything glow like captured moonlight. Bridges arched over underground rivers, and Clara could see people vampires moving through streets and plazas, all of them with that same pale beauty, that same preternatural grace. "This is the Corvinus district," Bastian said softly. "The heart of my house. I wanted you to see it, to understand what I'm trying to protect." Clara walked forward in a daze, taking it all in. The architecture was a mix of styles spanning centuries. Gothic arches beside Art Nouveau facades, medieval towers next to sleek modern structures. It was beautiful and strange and absolutely impossible. "How long has this been here?" she whispered. "This district, about 400 years. But vampires have lived beneath Prague for over a millennium." He guided her across a bridge, and vampires they passed bowed their heads to him, respect and recognition. "Every major city has an underground like this. It's how we've survived for so long." They entered a building that looked like a palace, all soaring ceilings and intricate stonework. Inside, vampires in formal clothes stopped to stare as Bastian led Clara through corridors. She realized they were staring at her, the human with the vampire king. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My home, the Corvinus Keep." He pushed open a set of double doors, revealing chambers that took Clara's breath away. The rooms were elegant and lived in, with bookshelves reaching to the ceiling, artwork spanning centuries, and windows that looked out over the underground city. "I wanted you to see where I live, who I am when I'm not pretending to be human." Clara moved through the space, touching books and paintings, trying to absorb it all. This was Bastian's life, his real life, 300 years of it preserved in these rooms. She saw a violin on a stand, a chess set, mid-game, modern technology mixed with antique furniture. "It's beautiful," she said finally. "But it's also lonely." Bastian went still. "What makes you say that?" "Everything here is perfect, but nothing feels shared." She turned to face him. "You've lived all these centuries alone, haven't you?" "There have been others," he said quietly, "over the years, but nothing that lasted. Nothing that mattered like this." Clara crossed the space between them. "I'm glad I matter. But Bastian, you have to know I can't live down here. I'm human. I need sunlight and fresh air and a world that doesn't exist in caves." "I know." He cupped her face in his hands. "I'm not asking you to become something you're not, Clara. I'm just asking you to let me love you as I am. We'll figure out the logistics. I can be above ground at night. You can visit below when you want. It doesn't have to be one world or the other. And if you can't avoid the marriage, if Lucian won't budge, then I'll find another way." His voice was steel. "I'm not marrying Serafina. Clara, I told you I'd fall with you, and I meant it, whatever it takes." She kissed him, and this time when he kissed back, there was a hunger in it that hadn't been there before. His hands slid down her back, pulling her against him, and Clara felt the careful control he'd been maintaining start to slip. His fangs grazed her neck, not biting, just promising, and she gasped. "Bastian," she breathed. He pulled back immediately, eyes blazing amber, breathing hard despite not needing to breathe. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't. Don't apologize." Clara grabbed his shirt, holding him close. "I want this. I want you. Clara, if we do this, there's no going back. You'll be mine and I'll be yours, and every vampire in this city will know it. It will make the political situation even more complicated." "I don't care about the political situation." She looked up at him, letting him see the truth in her eyes. "I love you, Bastian. I know it's only been days, but I love you anyway. And if we only have 6 weeks before the summit forces your hand, then I don't want to waste a single moment being careful." Something in Bastian's expression cracked open. "You love me," he repeated, like the words were precious. "Yes, stupidly, impossibly, completely." He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation. He lifted her easily, carrying her through his chambers to a bedroom that looked like it belonged in a palace. The bed was huge and covered in dark velvet, and when he laid her down on it, Clara's heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst. "I love you too," Bastian said, leaning over her. "I think I started falling the moment you asked me about Bach on that train, and I haven't stopped since." What happened next was tender and intense and thoroughly unhurried. Bastian took his time learning every inch of her, his cool hands and cooler mouth making Clara shiver and gasp. When he finally bit her carefully, asking permission first, the pleasure was so sharp and unexpected that she cried out. He drank just a little, then sealed the wound with his tongue, and Clara felt branded in the best possible way. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Clara traced patterns on his chest while he stroked her hair. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now, we keep fighting for this? For us," Bastian's voice was quiet but certain. "I meet with Lucian in 3 days. I'm going to offer him a formal military alliance, joint control of border territories, and a seat on a new unified council that would govern all 4 houses equally. It's more power than a marriage alliance would give him, and it protects his house without requiring his sister to sacrifice her happiness. Do you think he'll accept?" "I think he'll negotiate, and while he's negotiating, I'll be finding other allies among the houses, building support for a new structure of vampire governance." He kissed the top of her head. "It's going to work, Clara. It has to." She wanted to believe him, but she'd heard the uncertainty beneath his confidence, and she knew the risks they were taking. The next days were tense. Clara had 2 more concerts scheduled, and between rehearsals and performances, she barely saw Bastian. He was consumed with political maneuvering, meeting with representatives from the other houses, building the case for his alternative treaty. When they did steal time together, he looked increasingly exhausted, the weight of his responsibilities visible in every line of his body. But he never stopped being warm with her, never stopped making her feel like she was the center of his world, even while he was trying to save it. "The meeting with Lucian is tomorrow," he told her 5 days before the summit. They were in his chambers again, Clara curled against his side. "I'm as prepared as I can be. I have support from several influential vampires in the other houses, including Victor Serafina's lover. He's been quietly advocating for the alliance structure because it would free Serafina from the marriage obligation." "That's good, right?" "It helps. But ultimately, it comes down to Lucian. If he refuses, the whole treaty collapses, and we're back where we started." Bastian's arm tightened around her. "I need you to promise me something, Clara." "What?" "If this goes wrong, if I can't find a way out, promise me you'll leave Prague before the summit, go home to Boston, continue your tour, live your life." His voice was rough. "I won't let you watch me marry someone else, and I won't trap you in a situation where you're caught between me and my duty." "No." Clara sat up, glaring at him. "Absolutely not. I'm not running away." "Clara, you said we fall together. Remember? That means I'm here until the end. Whatever happens." She grabbed his face, making him look at her. "Besides, I might have an idea." Bastian blinked. "What kind of idea?" "You said the summit's purpose is to unify the houses, right? To show strength and solidarity?" She was thinking out loud now, the plan forming as she spoke. What if there was a public event that demonstrated that unity without requiring a marriage, something symbolic and powerful that everyone could witness? Like what? Like, Clara hesitated, then committed. Like a performance, a concert at the summit's closing ceremony, featuring human musicians playing for vampire royalty, a symbol of the peace between our worlds, and by extension, peace among the houses. Bastian stared at her. "Clara, that's brilliant. A public display of unity and cooperation that doesn't depend on a marriage alliance. It could work as a centerpiece for the new treaty structure." Then his expression clouded. "But it would put you in danger. You'd be exposed to vampire politics at the highest level, and some of my kind don't love humans the way I do." "I can handle it," she said firmly. "And Bastian, this is how I can actually help. This is what I'm good at: music, performance. Let me use that." He kissed her, fierce and grateful. "You're extraordinary, do you know that? You've mentioned it once or twice." The meeting with Lucian Draconis took place in a neutral location, an underground chamber beneath the Prague castle, lavishly appointed and guarded by vampires from all 4 houses. Bastian brought Clara with him, which raised eyebrows, but he insisted she was part of his proposal. Lucian Draconis was intimidating, tall and severe, with silver-white hair pulled back in a tail and eyes like chips of ice. His sister Serafina stood beside him, ethereally beautiful and obviously miserable. Victor was there too, standing at attention in full military regalia, his eyes never leaving Serafina. "King Corvinus," Lucian said coldly, "you requested this meeting to present alternatives to our agreement. I confess, I'm skeptical." "I appreciate your willingness to listen," Bastian replied, matching his formal tone. "I've spent these past weeks consulting with historians, strategists, and representatives from all the houses. I believe I've found a solution that serves your interests better than the marriage alliance while also creating a more stable long-term peace." He laid out his proposal in detail. A unified council with equal representation from all 4 houses, binding military alliances, shared border territories, economic interdependence through trade agreements, and a public ceremony at the summit that would symbolize the new unity without requiring a political marriage. Lucian listened, his expression unreadable. When Bastian finished, there was a long silence. "And the human?" Lucian finally asked, gesturing at Clara. "Where does she fit in this proposal?" "This human," Bastian said, his voice taking on an edge, "is Clara Ashford, one of the finest cellists in the world. She's offered to organize and perform at the Unity Ceremony a concert featuring human musicians playing for vampire royalty. A symbol of cooperation between our species, which mirrors the cooperation you want among our houses." Serafina spoke for the first time. "That's actually beautiful. A display of culture and peace that everyone can witness, not just a private political arrangement." "You would say that," Lucian said sharply, "given that this arrangement would free you to pursue your own attachment." His eyes flicked to Victor, who stiffened but didn't look away. "Brother," Serafina said quietly, "you know I would do my duty. But if there's another way, a better way, why wouldn't we take it?" Lucian was silent for a long moment, studying the documents Bastian had provided. Clara held her breath, her hand tight in Bastian's. "This unified council," Lucian said finally, "how would power be distributed?" "Equally, with rotating leadership and unanimous consent required for major decisions. No single house could dominate." Bastian's voice was steady. "It's more protection for your house than a marriage would provide, because it's enshrined in law rather than dependent on personal relationships." "And the military alliance? My forces would be expected to defend Corvinus territory?" "And my forces would defend yours. Mutual protection, mutual benefit." Lucian set down the documents. "I need time to consider this, and I want to consult with my own advisors." "The summit begins in 4 days," Bastian said. "I need an answer before then." "You'll have it." Lucian stood, clearly dismissing them, but as they turned to leave, he added, "King Corvinus, I respect what you're attempting here, for what it's worth." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Clara and Bastian left the meeting cautiously hopeful. The next 3 days were chaos. Clara threw herself into organizing the concert, reaching out to musician contacts across Europe, coordinating with the summit planners, selecting pieces that would resonate with both human and vampire audiences. Bastian worked tirelessly on the political side, shoring up support, refining the treaty language, preparing for every possible objection. They barely slept, or, in Clara's case, barely slept. Bastian didn't sleep at all. But they worked side by side, and Clara felt the strength of their partnership in every shared glance and quiet moment. The day before the summit, Lucian Draconis sent his response. Bastian read the letter aloud to Clara in his chambers, his voice tight with tension. He agrees to the unified council structure and the military alliance. He's willing to accept the concert as the symbolic centerpiece of the summit, but he has one additional condition. "What condition?" Clara asked, dreading the answer. "He wants a formal blood oath from me, sworn before all 4 houses, that I will uphold the treaty terms in perpetuity. If I break the oath, My life is forfeit. Bastian set down the letter. It's significant. Blood oaths are binding on a level that human contracts aren't. He's asking me to stake my life on keeping my word. Will you do it? Yes, Bastian said without hesitation, because I mean what I'm promising, and because it's the price of keeping you. He pulled Clara into his arms. Lucian accepted Clara. He accepted. We did it. She kissed him, tasting relief and joy and the salt of tears she didn't realize she was crying. We actually did it. You did it, he corrected. Your idea gave me the leverage I needed. I told you you were extraordinary. The summit opened the next evening in the grand hall beneath Prague Castle, a massive cavern transformed into a throne room, with representatives from all 4 vampire houses in attendance. Clara had never seen so many vampires in one place, all of them pale and elegant and radiating power. Bastian sat on a throne at the center, flanked by the other 3 kings, Lucian Draconis, the severe and silver-haired, Matthias Noctis, ancient and terrifying, his eyes black as pitch, and Theron Erebus, youngest of the kings but no less formidable. Clara sat in a place of honor to Bastian's right, very aware that she was the only human in the room. The first 2 days of the summit were filled with formal proceedings, presentations of the new treaty terms, debates over specific clauses, negotiations over council positions. Clara watched Bastian in his element, commanding and diplomatic, respected even by those who opposed him. She felt a surge of pride seeing him like this, not just the man who held her at night, but the king who led his people. On the 3rd evening, the Unity concert took place. Clara had assembled a small chamber orchestra, violin, viola, cello, and piano, all human musicians she trusted. They played in the center of the grand hall, surrounded by hundreds of vampires, and Clara poured everything into the performance. She chose pieces about longing and connection, and hope, Schubert, and Beethoven, and Brahms, and watched as even the most stoic vampires were visibly moved. When the final piece ended, the silence was absolute. Then Bastian stood, and the entire room rose with him. The applause that followed was thunderous, and Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she bowed. After the concert, the treaty signing ceremony began. All 4 kings signed the document, then clasped hands over a chalice of blood, the formal oath-binding. Clara watched as Bastian spoke the words that bound him to the treaty, his voice strong and clear, and felt the weight of what he was promising. Not just peace for his people, but a future where they could be together. The ceremony concluded with a pronouncement from Matthias Noctis, the eldest king. Let it be known that the 4 houses are now united under a single council, bound by blood and honor. Let this peace endure for centuries to come. The hall erupted in celebration, and Clara finally allowed herself to believe it was real. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd found a way. Later that night, after the official events had ended, Bastian found Clara on one of the bridges overlooking the underground city. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. We did it, he murmured. It's over. We're free. Clara leaned back against him, savoring the moment. What happens now? Now, I get to court you without the weight of an impending political marriage hanging over us. I get to see where this goes without rushing or panicking. He turned her to face him. And I get to ask you something I've been wanting to ask for weeks. What? Stay, he said simply. Not just for the rest of your tour. Stay in Prague. Make a life here with me. I know it's asking a lot. You have a career in Boston, family, friends, but Clara, I can't imagine my life without you in it now. So I'm asking, will you stay? Clara's heart was so full it hurt. She thought about her small apartment in Boston, her teaching position at the conservatory, the carefully planned future she'd envisioned. And then she thought about Bastian, the way he looked at her like she was precious, the way he'd fought for her, the way he made her feel brave enough to be reckless. Yes, she said, I'll stay. His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. Really? Really. I can tour from here just as easily as from Boston, and I think Prague might have slightly better opportunities for dating vampire kings. He laughed, then kissed her thoroughly. When they pulled apart, his eyes were glowing amber, and Clara felt that now familiar thrill of belonging to something extraordinary. I love you, Clara Ashford, Bastian said. more than I thought I could love anything after 300 years of existing. I love you too, she replied, and I plan to keep loving you for as long as you'll have me. Forever then, he said, as if it was obvious, though we'll need to discuss logistics, where you'll live, how we'll manage the day-night schedule, whether you want to meet my extended vampire family who are absolutely going to interrogate you. Clara laughed. One thing at a time. For now, just kiss me again. He did, and Prague sparkled around them like a city made of stars. The months that followed were the happiest of Clara's life. She moved into a penthouse apartment in the old town above ground, with plenty of windows, but close enough to the underground that Bastian could visit easily each night. She continued her touring, with Bastian accompanying her when his duties allowed, and her career flourished. The story of the human cellist who'd performed for vampire royalty spread through both worlds, and suddenly she was receiving invitations from concert halls across Europe. Bastian was busy with his new council responsibilities, navigating the complicated work of unified vampire governance. But he always made time for Clara, and their relationship deepened into something solid and real. They learned each other's rhythms. She adjusted to his nocturnal schedule as much as possible. He learned to appreciate the human world through her eyes. They weren't without challenges. There were vampires who disapproved of their relationship, who thought Bastian had weakened himself by choosing a human over a political alliance. There were logistical complications about Clara's mortality and how they would handle the inevitable passage of time. But they faced each challenge together, and Clara never regretted her choice. A year after the summit, Bastian proposed to her on the anniversary of their meeting on another night train, in another sleeper compartment, though this time he'd arranged for it to be private. He offered her a ring of silver and moonstone, matching the necklace he'd given her before her first Prague concert. "I know we have complications to work out," he said, kneeling in the narrow space between seats. "I know my world isn't easy, and I know you're giving up a normal life by being with me. But Clara, you are the best thing that's happened to me in 3 centuries, and I want forever with you, however long your forever is." Clara said yes through tears, and they were married 3 months later in a ceremony that blended human and vampire traditions. It took place in the grand hall beneath Prague Castle, with guests from both worlds in attendance. Clara wore white, Bastian wore black, and when they exchanged vows, every word was a promise they both intended to keep. The question of Clara's mortality hung over them for years. Bastian never pressured her to turn. He'd made clear from the beginning that it was her choice alone. But as Clara approached her 30s and then her 40s, she began to think seriously about what she wanted. She loved her human life, loved music and sunlight and the rhythms of mortal existence. But she loved Bastian more, and the thought of leaving him, of forcing him to watch her age and die while he remained unchanged, was unbearable. On their 5th anniversary, she told him she was ready. "Are you certain?" Bastian asked, his hands framing her face. "Clara, once it's done, there's no going back. You'll outlive everyone you know. You'll have to give up so much." "I'll gain more than I lose," she said firmly. "I'll gain forever with you. That's worth everything else." The turning was done privately, just the two of them in his chambers beneath the city. It was painful, but brief, and when Clara woke 3 days later, the world had transformed. Colors were sharper, sounds were clearer, and the hunger for blood was immediate and overwhelming. Bastian taught her control, guided her through the transition with patience and love. It took months for Clara to feel like herself again, to adjust to her new senses and abilities. But gradually, she found her footing. She discovered she could still play cello. Her enhanced hearing and coordination actually made her better, and that brought her immense relief. The best part was the freedom. She and Bastian could travel without worrying about her mortality. They could make long-term plans without the shadow of her death looming over them. They could simply be together without counting the years. Decades passed. Clara continued performing, becoming something of a legend in both the human and vampire worlds, the cellist who'd helped broker peace among the houses and then chosen to join them. She and Bastian remained deeply in love, their bond strengthening with each passing year. When they'd been together for 30 years, 25 of those as both vampires, they made the decision to have a child. Vampire reproduction was rare but possible, and after much discussion with healers and historians, Clara became pregnant. Their son was born on a spring evening, arriving with surprising ease. They named him Cosmin, an old name that meant order and beauty, and he was perfect. Dark-haired like Clara had been, but with Bastian's striking pale skin and amber eyes. Raising a vampire child brought its own challenges and joys. Cosmin grew slowly, would likely remain young looking for decades before reaching maturity. But he was bright and curious and loved music, and Clara couldn't imagine loving anything more. On a quiet evening when Cosmin was 5 years old, Clara and Bastian stood on their favorite bridge overlooking the underground city. Cosmin was with Serafina and Victor, who'd married shortly after the summit and become close friends, giving his parents a rare moment alone. "Do you ever regret it?" Bastian asked, his arm around Clara's waist. "Choosing this life?" Clara looked at him, her husband, her king, her love, and smiled. "Not for a single moment. You promised you'd fall with me, remember?" "And I did," Bastian said softly. "We both did. All the way into this. Into forever," Clara agreed. They kissed as Prague sparkled around them, and Clara thought about the night train where this had all started. She'd been a mortal cellist with a careful life and careful dreams, and she'd whispered, "I think I'm falling for you," to a beautiful stranger. He'd said, "Then I'll fall with you." And he'd meant it. They both had. And here they were, decades later, still falling, still together, still choosing each other every single day through vampire politics and parenthood and the long, beautiful stretch of immortal years ahead. Clara had given up her mortality, her old life, the sunlight she'd loved. But in return, she'd gained everything that mattered, love and partnership and a family and a future that would last longer than she'd ever dreamed possible. It was worth it. It would always be worth it, because some things were worth falling for, worth fighting for, worth keeping forever. And Bastian, her vampire king, her husband, her home, was all of those things and more. They stood on the bridge for a long time, just holding each other, while the underground city glowed around them like captured stars. And somewhere in the distance, Clara could hear music playing, because music was eternal. And so now was she. The future stretched ahead of them, long and full of possibility. There would be challenges and changes, new adventures and old complications. But they would face it all together, hand in hand, falling and rising and falling again, forever. Just as he'd promised, that first night on the train when she'd been brave enough to speak her heart, and he'd been brave enough to answer. "Then I'll fall with you." And they had. They were. They would. Always. They